Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for registering for this session. I hope you all are doing great and think of your health. To start with the session today, we have Mr. Adit Gupta, who is the speaker for the session. Adit is Senior Design Manager at ServiceNow. He leads the process there and have been in this ground since long. And he will be taking you through different aspects of strategy thinking, different steps that are involved in problem solving. And I'm sure those things are very much necessary for the foundation of building any successful company, any successful startup. So, to all the attendees, since this is a two-way communication that is required, please feel free to put your question in the chat and Q&A box. We'll take the questions, during the Q&A round. And thank you, Adit, for accepting our request and being the speaker for the session today. It's always a pleasure to have you. Over to you, Adit.
Yeah, thank you, Shankar. Thank you for that nice introduction. So I'll start sharing my screen and let me know. So I'm going in full mode. Is it visible?
Yes, we are able to see the screen.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining. I hope everybody is doing in safe and fine. These are tough times, but I think we are just kind of trying our best to sail through it. So today I'll be talking about strategy and problem solving for building a company. And this is one topic which always tend to stay with you, irrespective of the fact whether you are running a company or whether you are working in a company, because strategy and problem solving is somewhere always involved in the process. But before we start, let me just begin by my brief introduction. So I'm Adit, and I have been designing products for quite a while now. I started as a technology evangelist and Python lead at a company called as SourceBits, based out of Bangalore. And thereafter, I have designed products for companies like Falenco and PayPal. And in between, I founded a startup called as Function Space, and we are going to talk about it a lot today. And from 2019 till date, I have been working at ServiceNow. I'm also a design mentor for Google for Startups. And before that, I was also a Google developer expert in product design. And lastly, I'm also a philosopher in training. So I just recently completed my master's in philosophy. So when we talk about building a company, there are several factors associated with it. I mean, first of all, like there are things like raising funds, and then there is this extremely tough task of hiring, which always gives you sleepless nights, throughout the journey of your company. Then you have to also build that collaborative environment of your team, which ensures that you have a good culture at the company. But I think the two most important factors are, well, your product and the way you distribute your product. And if you get two of these wrong, well, the companies ceases to exist. And this I'm speaking from a personal experience, that how important, I mean, these two things are. So this entire talk is focused on strategies regarding product and distribution. Obviously in Q&A we can talk about other factors like hiring and funding and team and culture, but for the most part I'll be focused on product and distribution. So coming off talking about strategy, well, I got some help from our friends at Harvard Business Review, or HBR in short, and they published an interesting article, I think, a year back, about strategy and different strategical ideas, and they classified all these ideas into three big buckets. That is, when you're talking about strategy, you are either doing something new, or you are building on what you are already doing, or you are reacting opportunistically to emerging possibilities. So all your strategies basically can be classified into these three big buckets. And so this is what I have taken as the fundamental for this talk, and the talk has a certain structure to it. So what I'll be doing is that I'll pick one of these strategy ideas, and then we'll see it in context of function space, like how we applied these strategies and then what were the outcomes. We'll analyze the outcomes and we'll see whether it was like a success or a failure, and we'll see the reasons behind it. And ultimately, towards the end of the presentation, we'll come back to all these three strategies and we'll look at the big takeaways. But here's the important part, which we shall remember, that map is not the territory. It's a well-known mental model, and it says that it's not necessary that a map always accurately represents the territory. So this also holds for this talk. I'll be discussing these strategies with you, but they were true. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work, and they were true for a specific context in a certain circumstance. So there cannot be like 1:1 correlation that if this worked for us somewhere, it will also work for somebody else. So the recommendation is to always take all these strategies and ideas as cognitive tools so that you can shape your own strategies. So now let me talk a bit about Function Space. So Function Space was a social learning network for science. So it was in the edtech space, but it had this huge social network element to it. And the company ran from 2012 till 2015. We were three co-founders. And by the time we closed the company, we were a team of 52 members. The startup was funded by an institutional VC. We, in fact, raised a couple of rounds. And we grew the team before we had to close the company. And the reason for closing the company is will be covered in this talk. I think it's very important to also learn from things that didn't work out. So Function Space, as I said, was in this social networking space for science, and it started with my own need of having a dedicated platform to discuss science. Now, being a science and a math geek, I was always kind of surfing on the interwebs, going onto different forums to discuss any topics related to math and science. But I always felt that the space was fragmented and there was no dedicated platform for it. So either you had these forums which resembled your internet from the 90s, or you had the Stack Exchange network. So, when I thought of Function Space, I think the problem was that, how can I differentiate it in this fragmented space of online science discussions? And when I began working on it, it was only me. I was the only person working on the product. So I designed and developed like the very first version of it, like a minimum viable product, put it out there, and it was picked up on Hacker News, and we started getting certain signups for it. But then the differentiating factor was still not there. Now, being a designer, I thought that the first strategy of doing something new fits well when we can differentiate with respect to design. There has to be a clear intent on how we design the entire experience so that we stand out from all these forums and the Stack Exchange network which was out there, and create our own unique space in discussing science. So when talking about design, we relied on something which is called as the experience hierarchy. Now, when the first version of the platform was released, it was, I would say, like taken well by users. And we did get some of really good users from prestigious institutes like Caltech, MIT, Princeton, Stanford, and Harvard. So the first version was usable and functional. I mean, it was stable. There were no usability issues, but it was still not there to create a difference among the sea of forums which are out there. And there were specific reasons for it. So we realized that, first of all, it was not very convenient. There was a lot of content on the platform, but it had like certain discoverability issues here and there. The search was not working as intended. The platform also lagged some of the modern social networking features. I mean, there was no real-time feed. It was pretty static in nature. So the experience was not pleasurable. And I think one of the biggest missing factors for us was the entire platform was not very meaningful for our users. Now at Function Space, we had a very wide spectrum of users, right from your high school students till postdocs and professionals. So there was all sort of content on the platform. There was like content which was like really into like high math and physics, and then there was also content which you usually see in schools. But the entire content was mixed up on the platform. So it was not so, let's say a high school student joined the platform, and then the person used to get lost with all that complex content, so it was not very meaningful. So we realized that we were missing on these top 3 tiers of the experience hierarchy, and we started working towards it, and then released a new better version. And this is where we came up with a real time feed which was completely personalized, based on your taste and the options that you give during onboarding. So let's say you selected a certain subjects and you selected the rigor of those subjects, so now you will get a feed just according to what your preferences are. And this really worked well with our users. We saw we saw that our engagement metrics were going up, and the real time feed also allowed users to be very specific with what they were contributing on the platform. So we checked the two top tiers on our experience hierarchy. The entire experience was now more pleasurable, was more meaningful. We also introduced an interesting thing called as function space index, and let me just give a brief context about it. So in the world of science publishing, when you publish a paper, your contribution is measured by something called as H index. And the way it works is that, let's say you published a paper, and then people start citing your papers because either it's too good, or there is like really something new covered in your paper which is useful for other authors too. So the more citations you receive, the higher your H index is. So we just took a parallel of that on function space and introduced something called as function space index, and it worked in a fashion similar to H index. So the more you contribute, and if people like your contributions, your score will go up. So this was like a gamified experience, and because it had its parallel in the scientific community, our users also really loved it. And again, it became a very pleasurable and meaningful experience for our users. And here's another thing, right, that which I always tend to think of, that how can you create in such a way that it kind of takes away the complexity from the user. So when it comes to discussing science, I mean, it's inevitable that you have to always write equations, and the standard way of writing equations digitally is to learn LaTeX. Now LaTeX is not that easy. You have to learn through a lot of syntax, and only if you are into science publishing, well, you are well versed with LaTeX, but that's not true for let's say high school students, or you're a general professional. So we use something called as a visual equation editor first, in which you can simply drag and drop the symbols and make your own equation and just copy paste the LaTeX on the website. But then we went ahead and introduced something called as equation caller, in which, let's say, you can, if you just know the name of the equation, like Schrodinger's or like the cosine of angles, you can just type it and the equation will be pre-filled for you. Now, this was one case in which it became really simple for our users to embed equations on the platform, and the whole experience became really convenient for them. Now, all these design things that we did on the platform, it really worked well with our strategy that we'll do something new, we'll do something innovative in science community, in science sharing and discussions, and it worked well, right? Because in terms of measuring, we were diligently measuring our engagement metrics and how much people are contributing to the platform, how much time they are spending on the platform. So all those numbers we saw rising when we introduced all these new features. So for us, this was a strategic win for us, that okay, doing something new really worked well. But now we get to the more complex part of it, which is how do you grow your community? And there are two aspects of it. Like, you can do something with the product, but then I think the bigger aspect of it is how exactly do you start, or how exactly do you work on your distribution? So when it comes to growing our community, we again relied on our proven strategy of let's try to do something new. Perhaps it can attract more people on the community. So we took help from the hook model. Now, the hook model was introduced by Nir Eyal, I think in 2011, 2012, in his book called as Hooked. and it has like 4-step process which is cyclical in nature. So it says that there has to be some sort of a trigger that you send to your user, which kind of brings the user to the platform, wherein they can act on something which is there on your product, and based on their action they get certain variable reward, which is the whole gamification experience. And once you give them the reward, they basically contribute back on the platform in terms of adding more content to it. So we use this model, and we, as triggers, we used to send emails and notifications, and and this led people to add more comments and discussions. They were getting variable rewards in terms of gamification, and this led to more discussions and more engagement, thereby completing the entire cycle. So we kind of again diligently applied this hook model. There was instrumentation done at every step, so that we can understand which step is working, which step is not working, and this model also really worked well for us. Now, another thing, or another common adage in for products which deal with engagement is that you have to make your product in such a way, such that the analogy is that, let's say you brush your teeth twice in a day. Similarly, your product should be such that people should at least come twice on your product. So going by that adage, we introduced something called as quarter topics, in which we were sharing 4 interesting topics every 4 hours. And people used to get emails for that, or notifications, not all the time but sometimes. And these topics were connected to more discussions on the platform. So it was almost like creating that Wikipedia loop, in which you start begin reading something, and you just kind of go down the rabbit hole. And once we introduced the quarter topics, we started getting more engagement. They were like triggers which were bringing users on the platform, and which were leading to then more contributions from our users. So again, doing something new worked well for us. And the story is like all good and fine here. But then we also started missing out big time on other strategies. And here's the thing, right? I think we missed a big time on building what you already do. So we already had a great user base from all these premium institutes, and our signups were increasing. But we missed on actually capitalizing on our user base. So even though we had users from like MIT and Stanford, we could have introduced like a campus ambassador program or a platform chapters, wherein our users themselves can attract more students and more people on the platform. But we never introduced such a program, and we over relied on PR and advertisements. I mean, we were just paying like a big sum to the PR firm, and we were again overpaying on advertisements. So this was growing our user base, but there's nothing like word of mouth. And I think we kind of missed on that part, because without any word of mouth program out there, I think it was we were just kind of throwing more money to get kind of more users on the platform, which actually didn't work out really well for us. But now let me kind of focus on some of the biggest failures that and this is regarding monetization on the platform. And this was perhaps the biggest distribution failure for us, which eventually led us to close the company itself. So let me give some context around it. When we started back in 2012-13, it was, for any social network, the common thing that you will hear across VCs and across startup was that user is the new currency. So the idea was that get as many users as possible on the platform, and once you have a number of users, then you can go ahead with a certain monetization strategy. So our inexperience with starting up, and our inexperience with whole strategies kind of showed up when we kind of relied too much on getting new users, and you saw that even we had failures there too. But then we were not at all proactive about monetization. We never thought about monetization. I mean, it should have been something which should have been at the back of our heads even when we started. but we were like so much focused on just getting the users on the platform that we never thought about it. And by the time we started giving it a thought, I think it became too late. So I think the whole tide turned around 2014-15, when other edtech startups like Coursera and Udemy were also struggling. So when we went to US to raise more funds, we started hearing from VCs that like you are not earning any sort of revenue, and edtech startups are failing left and right. So it was that time when we realized that we kind of went overboard with our strategy of just kind of acquiring users and never thinking much about monetization. So when we started thinking about it, we went in like every possible direction. We thought of why not introduce sort of a marketplace wherein people can make small apps using our APIs, or we can have partnerships with industries, or we can have partnerships with academic institutes, or we can just go with the old school strategy of advertisements. So there were like too many thoughts, and there was no focus, and I think we paid heavily for that. But I think the biggest strategy failure for us was that not reacting opportunistically to emerging possibility. And here's the thing, right? Back then we had this loyal base of users who were contributing on the platform, like just by themselves. They were self-driven. They used to come on the platform. They used to write like articles. They used to write discussions. But then we missed on the creator economy, and we know how big it is today. Like talk about Patreon, talk about Substack, or even Instagram. The creator economy is the biggest thing that you are seeing today. And I always felt that we had this early start in science wherein people were perhaps ready to contribute more to the platform, but we just missed on it. I mean, we were looking in every other direction, but we should have just kind of looked at our own users and should have enabled them to make or to contribute back to the platform, and also reward them for that. But we missed on that, which eventually kind of led us to shut the company, because we were like far from coming to any solid revenue plan. And we started with a marketplace idea, but then it didn't work out. So yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, right? Like if you don't react opportunistically at the right time to these possibilities, well, you are always in this in this danger zone where things can just go bad. So speaking of takeaways, right? What are the big takeaways? So let's go strategy by strategy. So speaking of doing something new, well, this is one strategy which worked well for us, and there were some reasons. Probably because of my design background, there was some things which were coming naturally. So one of the very important thing when you are doing something new is to understand the evident and latent needs of people. So evident needs are something which people will tell you, right? They will email you, they will shout out on Twitter that we need this thing, we need this feature. So these are pretty evident, they are easy to know. But then there are latent needs. So latent needs are something which you can only know by talking to people or by observing them in their environment. So when we were talking to our users, and we also had some interactions with people who were studying at Inter-University Center of Astronomy and Astrophysics. So we came to know that they always have to kind of write equations, and so they usually used to take a pic of their handwritten thing and upload it on forums. But nobody asked just for an equation caller or a visual equation editor. And LaTeX was just taken as the default tool, or you just write down the equation. So we just kind of realized this latent need and developed a feature on it, which was like really appreciated by people. So yeah, it's really important that you understand both the evident and latent needs of people when you are doing something new. But here's the thing, right? When you are doing something new, you also sometimes get blinded by it, and you make n number of assumptions that, okay, if you're doing something new, then probably it will always work out and people will always like it, and let's just go ahead and make something new. And that novelty sometimes creates a bias in your mind, and you tend to overlook on things. So this is where I always tell to apply the Occam's razor, which simply says that if you are providing a solution, go with the solution which has the least number of assumptions, right? So if you are making something new and if you have several ideas, just pick something in which you're not making a lot of assumptions about, how people will use it or why people will use it. So apply that Occam's razor and always be aware that novelty perhaps is not always the solution. You really have to understand if this is something which actually falls into that evident and latent needs bucket, and there are not many assumptions to it. So this is where, you can do good with the strategy of doing something new. Now let's come to the next strategy, which is like building on what you already do. So I think there are two golden rules here. One is like you always take regular feedback and do quick iterations. This is something which is again comes pretty naturally, to the design team. And this is something which I always recommend, that keep on taking feedback, both qualitative and quantitative. Have your instrumentation in place. I mean, always you have to take proper consent before you are kind of tracking anything. But with consent, have proper instrumentations, meet a lot of people so that you get regular feedback and do quick iterations. Also, don't replace what's not broken, right? Again, there's the novelty bias always, tends to blind you, and you kind of, sometimes replace things which are not just broken. So don't do that. And whenever you are building on features, on your existing features, always think of it in terms of whether you are supplementing your existing features or whether you're complementing it. There should be no feature which just comes out of the blue just because your competitor is doing it, right? I mean, and we are seeing that trend today, especially with things like stories, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but like Twitter also introduced fleets, and because everybody was doing stories, and it just didn't work out for them. And as far as I know, they are kind of sunsetting fleets now. This is a classic case wherein they introduced something just because everybody was doing it, but it was neither supplementing their core experience, neither it was complementing it. It was just there, like an odd one out kind of a feature. So when you're building on something which you're already doing, think whatever you're doing next is either supplementing or complementing it. And now let me come to the last one, which is perhaps for me the most important one, is that how do you react opportunistically to emerging possibilities? And one of the very important thing to remember is have a distribution first mindset. Now you might have heard this before on Twitter or elsewhere, that first time founders are obsessed with product, but second time founders are obsessed with distribution. And this is important, right? Because once you know how you are going to distribute your product or your features, you are reducing probability in the equation, right? So let's say you made a good product and you feel that it has the right product market fit, and you just release it without having some sort of a distribution or network in place. You are relying too much on probability. I mean, you're relying too much on chance. And ideally, and I think that should not be the case. I mean, we all should do our homework. We should have our distribution channels figured out, and then we should go ahead and kind of release the product. I often see companies, when I ask them about what's your distribution strategy, they say that we'll release it on Product Hunt, we'll release it on Hacker News, we'll release it on Reddit. But that all these platforms, it's not necessary that your product is always going to make it to the top unless you also have a distribution strategy for that, right? So people have distribution strategy for Product Hunt too. So if you have that, that's great, right? But if you don't have that, well, you are relying too much on chance. So whenever possibilities come, right, if you already have figured out your distribution strategy, it really works well. And this is connected to my second point, which is the first mover advantage. So let's say you feel that there is some new technology or there is some new trend in the market which is coming up, and you can really grab that and can have the first mover advantage. Well, that works well if you execute it also well. So here's the thing, right? If I remember it correctly, Flipkart, I think 10, 12 years back, they saw this trend that, e-commerce is slowly picking up. But then in India, you always have trust issues for paying first before getting the product. And so even though they saw this possibility of this huge e-commerce potential in India, they felt that they needed something to tap into this possibility, and then they introduced cash on delivery, right? Which was, I think, one of the best innovation that I've seen in the e-commerce field, in which they tapped into this potential of e-commerce throughout India, not just the metros, but tier 2, tier 3 cities, and they had that first mover advantage there. So again, a classic case wherein you saw the possibility, had the first mover advantage, and executed it well. I mean, we did solve some problems later in cash on delivery, but then when it was introduced, it was a brilliant strategy to begin with. And your first mover advantage is always connected with other strategies in place. So you have to do something new if you want to move first. But when you move first, you have to build on it iteratively, which is what I mean by executing your strategy well. So, these are my three big strategies and three big takeaways. And after function space, I realized where I missed. I missed on distribution strategy. That was the biggest one. And I missed on kind of, on the revenue and monetization of a product. So after function space, I released a product called as UX Assist, which is a very simple app for designers. And this is where kind of I worked on the part where I missed in my last company. So being in the design space, I had this whole design network. So the distribution part was kind of figured out. I reached out to more people before releasing UX Assist, kind of created a sort of momentum for it. And when I released the product, well, it was paid from day one. So now the product has been running for 5 years. It is now the most selling design productivity app from India. Now it's in version 2. And even though I have not found like a company around it, the app has been doing well on the side. So yeah, so this is what, this is where I realized that if you really think of these three strategies throughout the process of your company and execute it well, I think it can do wonders for you. So yeah, that's all I have today. I wanted to make the presentation brief so that we can have a very interactive Q&A session. Thank you.
To all the audience, you can use the raise hand option so that we can you can directly talk to the speaker, or else you can have the chat window in place, so you can put your questions in the chat window. The raise hand option is much simpler. You just have to use the raise hand option to put your question down. You can use the Q&A box as well to put your questions.
Okay, so we do have a question in Q&A box. Any strategies for distribution channels for edtech startups?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, it depends like in which domain exactly is your edtech startup is. So if your edtech startup is, let's say, in the domain of competitive exams, then perhaps you can think of various ways. First of all, as far as competitive exams is concerned, the only distribution strategy which I've seen working well is having a very aggressive sales team, which means that you are proactively reaching out to many parents out there. You are proactively advertising about it because this space is filled up, right? There is a lot of competition there. And I think what is happening right now is that the loudest voice is getting heard, and you have seen like Baiju kind of being really aggressive with their sales strategy in a tech startup. That is one. The other thing is, can you also potentially do any partnerships with existing coaching institutes? And well, if you are Baiju, you can just acquire coaching institute. But yeah, I mean, if you are beginning in this space, maybe one of the things is getting partnerships with these coaching institutes, getting partnerships with even institutes. So I have also seen at tech startups getting having partnerships with schools and institutes and providing them materials. So because you get a user base directly there, and it's also easy to reach out to parents if you reach out to these schools and institutes. So yeah, I mean, it totally depends on which domain your edtech startup is. In India, I have mostly seen edtech startups in the competitive exam space. So perhaps partnering can be a good distribution strategy.
Adit, in case we could talk on few other topics which can be to this uh, domain. That would be
Right.
nice. I think Raveen has meanwhile raised an hand. Yes, Raveen, please go ahead with your question.
Hi Adit, this is Raveen Bharja from Gujarat. Thank you very much for wonderful session. First time I'm hearing that you shared the entire journey of things which didn't work out. So I think this gives more clarity on energy at start, and then also sometimes we feel that something didn't work out, then what to think. So thank you for sharing. I'm
Thank
coming
you.
from manufacturing background. I work in the corporate for quite long in the complex industry like aerospace manufacturing domain. Now I'm building my own startup named as Find Me Factory, where it is kind of a marketplace where we help OEM to find the right manufacturing partners from across the India, various domains. So there as well, we do see a need of building the community. Like in various time, we see in outside India, there are people who share a lot of things in mechanical machines, things on social media and doing their stuff. But it is yet not that much started in India. Well, India is the second largest manufacturing hub. So if you want to do something in this line, building something where people more openly do something, discussions and everything, there's a community building, so that it can advantage for everybody. It's a knowledge sharing kind of a thing also. So if you just share something what can be done. Currently things are working, but if you build as a community, it would be still further can expand as a business.
Okay.
Well, I hope
Yeah.
my question is clear.
Yeah. Thanks, Ravin. First of all, thank you for your nice comment. And even though I'm not very familiar with the manufacturing space, I do, get your point. So, in terms of building a community, here's the thing, right? I think we always tend to look at a digital first solution, but in a market like India, it's not, that might not be perhaps the best way, right?
Okay.
So I remember talking with somebody who were dealing with products related to textile, not exactly textile, like handicraft. Yeah, so they were working on products related to handicraft, and they started working with, similar to that ambassador idea, wherein they appointed some ambassadors in different cities who would reach out to these craftsmen and create their own local communities, and then work together with them to kind of create a larger community of communities. So this was a complete offline effort, right? It was digitally enabled, I would say, wherein they did had some digital presence, but it was more led offline. So there were people who were reaching out to these craftsmen. So similarly, maybe in manufacturing, if you have small manufacturers, there can be a program wherein you can reach out to these people and work with them to share ideas. So maybe I would suggest that how about having like kind of an offline and online program mix rather than just having something which is online, because you also have to understand like what exactly is the persona of this manufacturer. Not all of them might be that digital savvy to kind of participate in Zoom meetings or come in online seminars or webinars, but they might be more open if you reach out to them in person and share the idea with them, and then create like a local community around it. So perhaps that can also work.
No, you are right. That point is that I do see that. In mechanical or manufacturing industry, things are there since quite some time before online. So there are chambers, commerce, groups, associations there, but things doesn't work there as well. And in Indian community, people are not so open to share the solutions on YouTube's and so. But if you want to use any new tools and techniques in manufacturing, we always find videos from outside India. But Indian country is not that so available, and our challenges are different than their challenges. But so I think there as well, what you see, somewhere we need to build cluster-based things, because in India manufacturing is divided into clusters. So that cluster connection, online, offline things need to very
Right.
simple.
Yeah.
One question: how about getting associated with already having association? Means there may be already structure there. So
Right.
how we can leverage utilizing them in
Yeah.
terms of there is maybe a community there already doing something similar and
Right. Yeah, I think that can work great provided you have a sort of understanding with an existing community. Sometimes existing communities tend to be very controlling in nature, and if right, so you just need to understand if they are open to have like having you making equal contributions to it, and like are very open to it. But there is one more point, one last point which I want to say here is, I know that people are not open for many things. So I think that's where, our task is to realize the incentive part of it. So the question that we have to ask is, what's in it for me? Right. So what's in it for them? So people, they really sometimes, shy away from sharing because sometimes they don't see, enough leverage, or, they don't see like what they will be gaining from this contribution. So if we can, if we can crack that incentive part of it, like what's in it for them, perhaps people might be more open.
understand. Yeah, that's very good and valid point. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ravi. Adit, I think we could see a few questions in the chat box and then in the Q&A box.
Yeah. How can we keep campus ambassadors active and get things done? Okay. Yeah. So here's the thing. So campus ambassadors, to keep, I think you can just take a cue from what Google has been doing with their student developer community in colleges, right? So they have these ambassadors who kind of propagate Google technologies or new technologies in their colleges. They are recognized for that, and Google always is very active in holding these events in colleges. So I think this is what we need to do if we want to keep ambassadors and the community active in colleges. Keep on doing some certain events. Students are always excited. You can have things like hackathon. You can have some external industry speakers coming to colleges, because that also motivates students a lot. So that can be done. All these campus ambassadors can also be recognized on your platform, so that there is even more motivation for them to participate in their college communities. And so one of the ways that you recognize these campus ambassadors is how much they are active on your own platform. So you will see some people. So we, even though we didn't have campus ambassadors, we saw some folks who were pretty active in IIT Bombay. And when we kind of conducted an like an offline and online quiz, we gave them the responsibility to kind of do it. So you will see that there are some people who are more active in your community, more active on your platform, and perhaps they are the ones who can be your campus ambassadors. But the thing is to always keep the momentum going and to keep a two-way street, right? It should not be a one-way street that only you are telling them and not listening to them. So because they are right there in the campus, they know the pulse of the campus. So it's really, really important that you hear to them and take their advices, and then together build towards building the community in the college. So there are many organizations who have their chapters, and the key for a successful community is to have some regular activities, have some regular speakers, so that students always feel engaged in the community. I hope that answers the question. So I'm moving ahead with the next one. There is no revenue model. So by the way, LaTeX is it's a free. I mean, I kind of consider now programming language because I think it's Turing complete. So LaTeX is out there. It's open for anybody to use and utilize. You just need a kind of a processor to render LaTeX in normal equations. So there is no, I mean, as such a revenue model around it, but we have seen companies built over rendering LaTeX itself. So I'm forgetting the name of the company. It's Overleaf or Shareleaf, something like that. But they saw this problem of like typing out LaTeX all the time on like old age processors, and they created a modern processor with like live rendering and created a platform for it, which was like really taken up well by academics and professionals alike. But LaTeX is free to use, right? It's on you how you utilize it. So yeah. Okay. I think Shankar, we have all the questions answered. Any more questions?
No, yeah, we have Ujjwal who is, yes, please,
Yeah.
Ujjwal, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, hi, Adit. Am I
Okay.
audible?
Yeah. Hi, Ujjwal.
Yeah, hi. I believe you answered someone's question about distribution channels. We are also into EdTech, and we offer online mentoring, coaching, and mock interviews for candidates across multiple experience levels. So we are looking to add, I mean, we're looking to drive more user engagement or more users to sign up and take up our one-on-one sessions. So any ideas for or any strategies for distribution channels for such EdTech platforms?
Okay, so if I get it correctly, are you providing them like mock interviews?
Yeah,
Like
we
is
do.
that
Yes.
okay? And what kind of interviews are these? These are like coding interviews, or like these are your professional IAS like kind of interviews?
So we cover engineering domains, including coding and other domains as well.
Okay. So I'm not aware of your existing strategies, but like one of the things that I've usually seen on YouTube is people sharing these lot of videos of mock interviews on YouTube, which I feel have seen many of them going viral. So maybe that can be one of the ways, if you have not done it yet. You can also utilize modern platforms. So here's the thing, like the surprising fact is, like even platforms like Instagram, sometimes if you just share a small snippet on it, people do get kind of attracted to it, and you do see some conversion on it. So I can take an example, right? I on the side run a blog called as Indian Philosophy, and although I'm not generating any revenue for it, but I have kind of experimented with Instagram advertisements and Instagram kind of reels on it, and I've seen like really good conversion from it. So you can have your mock interviews like on platforms like YouTube, so that people can get attracted to it. Also, maybe again, I think you can reach out to certain engineering colleges, because I know that placement is always the key thing in every engineering college. So maybe doing some sessions there can also attract new users to your platform. So I always feel that distribution is a multi-pronged approach. It has to be offline. There has to be some sort of an offline mechanism wherein you reach out in a tech space, you reach out to these institutes and colleges and do certain demonstrations and talk to people and get some signups there. And I would always recommend being very dynamic about it, right? So you do a session and you say that, hey, the platform is open for signing up, please sign up right here. Don't tell them that please sign up later, right? I think some of the most dynamic founders I have met, they'll give a demonstration and they'll just ask you to sign up, and and it works. So maybe that offline strategy can work here. Online strategy is using your existing social media platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and even Twitter for that matter. And then if you do have a sales team, well, then you can also go with the the proven route of working with the sales team to drive more users. So the important part is that in a multi-pronged strategy, you have to measure which one is giving most conversions, right? And then kind of invest on the ones which is giving you better results. So yeah, I think everything should be measured. Try these different strategies, and you can then kind of determine what works best.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Raja is, I believe he's not there.
Okay.
He just may have dropped out. Anyways, we'll we'll wrap the session. I think we don't have any questions now. And thank you so much, Adit. It was a wonderful session. So many things has been discussed, and I'm sure our audience had a great time listening to you from last 1 hour. It's going to be 1 hour. Thank you again for accepting our request It's been a pleasure always to interact with you, to know more
Yeah.
about you and your domain. Thank you, Adit, for taking out time for the session today.
Yeah, thank you, Shankar, for giving this opportunity. It was great to talk, and looking forward to talking more in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, Adit.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and to all the attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. There is a link been shared. The feedback form basically. Please do share your feedback. It will help us to get new sessions, much better sessions in our forthcoming webinars. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe.